welcome back to the Salad Toss. I say this every single week, and then I always tell my listeners that I say this every single week. I'm super excited about this episode. I say that about every single episode, but I really am excited about this episode. This, as you see from the title, this is about new school versus the old school travelers. So I am very curious about how people used to travel back in the day because I feel like we have so many resources and tools now. So many people sharing their experiences about their traveling that it's so much easier now for new travelers or travelers in general to plan their travel, research their travel, know what they're getting into. There are videos, YouTube vloggers out there that document their traveling. So for those that are getting into that travel journey, it's there's so much information out there for them. But I feel like back in the day, I'm saying back in the day, maybe like 30, 40 years ago, um we didn't have they didn't have social media back then, so it was really based on word of mouth is what I'm imagining, or reading a magazine or watching something on TV. So that's why I wanted to bring in my dad today, as a quote unquote old school traveler, because he has traveled to internationally and of course around the states, as well, to get his perspective on his experience as a traveler, um, and how it has differed back in the day, and compared to now. So thanks for joining me, Daddy.
thank, thank you for having me there.
Of course. So you can just give just a brief intro about yourself, where you're from, just give the people some information about who you are, and we'll get into the travel piece later on.
Okay. Well, originally from South Philadelphia, and it's important because when folks are from Philadelphia, they usually say, they don't just say I'm from Philly, they'll say I'm from North Philly or West Philly or South Philly. So
Right.
I'm from South Philly, born and raised there, went to school in another part of Philly, uh, high school, Overbrook High School, and just started doing some traveling, even during my time in college, even though I had done some traveling before then. So it's a whole range of experiences there.
Mm-hmm. And we'll get into that, of course.
Mhm, mhm.
So as I mentioned earlier, the travel landscape has definitely changed over the year for many different reasons. And what sticks out to me the most is 9/11. That has definitely changed the way people have traveled, the way security is done at the airports. But of course, you have experience pre, and I'll say it in this way, pre and post 9/11. For me, I didn't really start traveling internationally, and I can't really remember when I did travel, like to Florida, by plane. I can't really remember those times, so I can't really give my experience on the pre 9/11 times of travel. But for you, can you kind of speak on that pre 9/11 travel landscape, and what did that look like for you?
Certainly. I'll start out by saying that the atmosphere in domestic and international travel was far more relaxed. We'll start with that.
Hmm.
I can remember, as you may not see today, remember seeing Trailway and Greyhound buses across the country. We don't see too much of that anymore. That's been pretty much replaced by cars, trains, and planes.
Hmm.
There were, I can remember as a kid, my mother was a block club captain, and as such, there were bus trips that were arranged, whether it's something as close as Atlantic City,
Mhm.
or just over to across the bridge just to go to the Latin Casino, which no longer exists, as well as far as Canada. I can remember most prolifically going on a bus trip that took us into Canada. There were no passports. Nobody asked for passports. We just crossed the border, and
Wow.
it was great. It was a great and enlightening experience there, to see different things there. We went to Montreal, Canada there,
Okay.
so I'll never forget that one. So that was a quite an interesting trip there. So a lot, and since my parents didn't have a car, that was our most convenient way of travel at the time for those types of trips here, unless you were traveling with a relative or something along that line.
And they didn't really have a car because they were in the city, and in Philly, pretty much the main form of transportation was the trolley or the bus or the subway trains, right?
That's correct. That's correct. As a matter of fact, I became so used to traveling on those different modes, even in high school. I took 4 different modes of transportation just to get to high school.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
I
How long did that
so
take?
actually it was an hour and a half from door to door.
Yes, that's crazy.
So literally, I walked down to the corner and caught one bus, uh, got off of that, over to Market Street, jumped on the subway surface car, which was a trolley,
Mhm.
and then rode that to 30th Street and jumped on the L, and then rode that to 56th Street and jumped on the G bus. I can still remember the buses.
And for those that don't know, the L is the subway line.
The elevated, that's right. That was actually the subway surface elevated line there.
Mhm.
And then if you're DC, it's called the Metro.
Right, right, exactly. So I just wanted to touch on, like, when you guys went to Canada, it was a whole group of you all. Did they, I mean, obviously they speak English over in Canada, but did you come across anyone speaking French, or do you recall any of those moments?
There may have been moments I didn't really engage with the uh, folks that were the citizens from there, because we sort of all kept together as a group, and I pretty much it was just if I wandered off, it might have just been maybe my brother and I just wandering off, but we didn't stray too far away, but we didn't really run into the a language issue over there.
Okay.
Mm.
Mhm.
By and large, those places that we went to pretty much were geared for folks that were just coming from over here that spoke English, so it made
Mhm.
things easy.
Okay, got you. So, in addition to the atmosphere being a whole lot more relaxed, was there anything else that stuck out to you pre 9/11?
Oh yeah, a lot of people don't even know that there was a time where smoking was allowed on airplanes. S- Uh,
Right, I guess because that's why they still have the signs there, like "Don't smoke."
yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah. Smoking wasn't actually banned on airplanes in the states until around the '70s, and interestingly enough, China didn't ban smoking on airplanes until around 2016.
Really? I didn't know that. Wow. Oh, good thing I ain't
Yes.
go to China.
Yeah, and then you had the other issue of boarding a plane where you had cockpit access. Clearly, and this is just one instance of domestic travel. You may remember, if nothing else, one of your first trips to Disneyland when we went to Disney World in Florida, and your brother and I were seated together, and he was a toddler then, but definitely afraid and maybe to this day still has some apprehensions about flying.
Right.
But in my attempts to assuage his anxiety, I would try to distract him and talk about different aspects of the plane while we're sitting there.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that happened was, at least I believe I was somewhat successful in tamping down his anxiety, so that by the time we arrived, he was so comfortable as we uh, as we all boarded the plane, as we deboarded.
Mhm.
Uh, I looked behind because he was walking behind me. I looked behind and I don't see him. Next thing I know, I'm hearing over the intercom, "Daddy, can you hear me? Can you hear me?" So he had become so comfortable. He had literally walked into the cockpit, made friends with with the pilot,
Right.
keyed up his microphone, and and reason, and so I was like, boy, get on out of there. See, so
Yeah, you
so
definitely
that
can't do that
you
today.
can't do that today. Yeah. So that I found that a pretty interesting one there.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, so and then even on the local side, when I used to on these bus trips, there were ski trips that I used to go on as I started to get into high school and started to get interested in skiing, and I would go on these trips. But then I didn't go on the trips as much. But then I found it an adventure to just jump in my car and find a local ski resort. So I jumped into my car and just traveled outside of Philly on my own, much, I'm sure, much to my mom's chagrin and anxiety to go to a strange place.
Right.
But I wound up just going skiing by myself. And then even just doing that and the venturing out, because understandably, you didn't get a whole lot of Black folks in South Philly that, certainly not my buddies that I played basketball in the schoolyard with, to have their own skis and go skiing. So
Right.
I had that independent and free spirit nature a long time ago.
Yeah, and I guess that's pretty much where I get mine from as well. And then I mean, you and mom exposing me to those experiences where my friends around the town didn't really experience such things such as skiing and camping and stuff like that. They were quote unquote white activities. I just thought they were fun, and I just liked the adventure, and that's what even now it's all about the adventure. But yeah, I pretty much have gotten that adventurous spirit from you.
And as you may recall, even later on, when I began to do more international traveling with my job, and as you know, and I can say it, I'm a retired FBI agent, so I had some travel here in places that we normally wouldn't go, which
Mhm.
also added to the spirit of adventure. But I would always try to bring some educational aspect one way or another so that you and your brother Anwar could enjoy or at least vicariously experience some of that travel there.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And one of the infamous ways was you bringing back some sand. I believe it was some sand from Egypt,
That's
and
correct.
I used it on
Which
my.
which I will deny having done, ever having been asked.
Well, I'm gonna get back to the point that I want to make, kind of like I'm about to gear off,
Sure.
but I used it for a science project, the sand, to build pyramids, the three main pyramids, Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure.
There you go. You remember.
Okay.
Outstanding. Outstanding.
All right. But I'm wondering, with customs nowadays, is that something that you will be able to bring back? With customs like take something like that?
I dare say it might be somewhat difficult. And not to mention, when you did that project, you constructed that project in the proper perspective of the two of them being in alignment and one of them being offset,
Mhm. Mhm.
which is actually historically accurate. So even that
Yeah, I
you
did
did
my
well
research with your help. I did my
on.
research on that, and that's when we didn't really have internet to look stuff up. We had to use the books or whatever
The
text
encyclopedias.
encyclopedias. Yep. So
And actually, before we had the internet, that was one of the ways that I learned about different places, because when I grew up, my parents had a set of World Book encyclopedias. And I assure you, I went from A to Z in those books and learned a lot of places just behind that.
yeah, those are definitely helpful tools. I remember having like a children's version of the encyclopedia, and I just love looking at the pictures and being inspired by the different cultures that they highlighted in those encyclopedias. So that definitely made a big impact on me. Um, so kind of going into so we kind of looked at the pre 9/11. So obviously one of the major things that are different is the security. As everyone, or a lot of people know, why, because of 9/11. But as far as afterwards, there's a lot more things that you cannot bring on the plane. And this is interesting because I feel like it's US specific because of what we went through with 9/11. Um, when I travel in Japan, just going to different prefectures by plane, I'm able to bring a bottle of water through security as long as it's even if it's open, even an open bottle of water, they will put it like on this electronic, I don't know, device that I guess it just looks through it or something like that. And they can detect if it's not water or not. And that kind of like highlights Japan's high technology over there. But yeah, I'm able to bring bottles of water through security. And but here in the States, there are a lot of things, definitely check the website, customs website before you travel to make sure what things you can bring, what things you can't bring. And I'll leave a link for that in the show notes. But was it like that before 9/11? Were there items that you remember that you couldn't bring through security?
No, I don't remember. As a matter of fact, one of the ones that impacted that issue and was created by 9/11 was the bringing aboard on things like pocket knives.
Mm,
You could bring a pocket knife aboard, which is how that issue spun up because of the access and how they were used during that time with the hijackers there.
wow.
So many things that pretty much now you didn't have those issues. You didn't have to take off your shoes. You didn't have to take off your clothes. If you had belts with buckles, you didn't have to take the belts off. So
Mhm.
there were things like that. I think the only thing that was sort of an issue was if you had a pacemaker and you went through the detectives and they just want to know, do you have do you have a pacemaker type stuff. That was really the one of
Mhm.
the things I remember that really just kind of caused any type of just extra steps or extra measures.
Could you bring pepper spray through?
Interestingly enough, before 9/11, people didn't really carry too much pepper spray around.
Mm,
It began because again the it was a more of a relaxed nature in travel
mhm,
and more of a relaxed nature in the country in general.
mhm,
So
mhm.
you didn't have those types of uh, more so precautions. Not to say that people didn't carry them, but you really didn't see those types of things too much there. If anything, it was more so what kind of contraband are you bringing through?
Mm, mm.
The plants or whatever you're bringing to another country or undeclared liquor, things like that.
Right, right. And I guess relax in a way that we used to leave our doors unlocked. It
Exactly,
wasn't a problem.
exactly. You
Yeah.
know, people were talking to each other.
Right.
You know, uh, I will tell you, interestingly enough, and this was a pre and post almost simultaneous observation when 9/11 occurred. Uh, you know, there were instances of people really being hyped up, and this was right around the time where I saw almost observed across the country there issues of people not necessarily they were more fragmented, and then 9/11 almost kind of brought them together.
Mm.
And then after 9/11, things kind of went back to being fragmented again.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
it was interesting to note that.
Yeah, I remember that too. I remember right after 9/11, people were a whole lot more friendly. They were cautious about certain groups of people, but then
Yes.
there were, but amongst their community or, other people, they were building a
Yeah.
stronger bond with people. They were being a lot more nicer, friendlier, more just like how this pandemic has, well, during the quarantine period, a lot of people were kind of, I guess, getting closer in a way because they weren't getting that uh, interaction, I guess. But so they were helping people a lot more, especially like the elderly folks, like bringing them groceries. And I don't know if that's a.
Oftentimes, that's an astute observation. Oftentimes, and I've seen this as a universal precept, is that oftentimes shared crises generate shared civility.
Mhm.
And that's what I saw then. That's what I'm seeing now. When people have to go through the same type of crisis, then there's a more of an opportunity for people to show appreciation for each other when they know that uh, that disaster can hit them,
Mm-hmm.
or they survived that disaster and their neighbor didn't. And so there's a greater appreciation of life in general.
But it's sad that it can't always be like that. Like I know when I lived in Japan, that was the atmosphere all the time. Like people always helping out, the elderly folk will come out. I think it was like maybe every Monday or something like that, just cleaning the streets together, just cleaning up the streets, or it's just always that communal environment there about the community. Everybody's together as a group. It's a group mentality there. But here in the States, I don't want to get too off topic about this, but I feel like in the States, I mean, once again, it's all about independency and individuality. So definitely
Yes,
really segregated
we
that way.
in this country we had neighborhoods.
Hmm.
We've gotten away from neighborhoods and neighbors.
Yeah.
And that was a mindset that was a very calming mindset. And we did that. We scrubbed steps. We put out flags. On 4th of July and the whole block type of thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah. So please
Yeah.
continue.
But yeah. So planning your trip, because as I mentioned earlier in the episode, we have a lot of resources. We have the internet. We have people sharing their experiences of where they went through a blog or a video vlog, as we say. There's so much information out there. So I know we kind of touched on the encyclopedia, but how would you plan your trip, or how did you find out about these places going, whether it was obviously through the bus trips, that was through the community um, group there, but for the other places that you went to, how did you find out about them, or how did you plan out your trip? Was there anything that you did back then that you do differently now?
Sometimes it was more of an issue of trial and error that you thought you could plan for everything, but you knew you would forget something or something was missing, and then you would learn that you had to buy something that you didn't bring. You can learn how to do that later on, but you learn how to share that with others that were looking to do that next time. So
Mhm.
that shared information in terms of knowing somebody who's been to a certain place before, you make sure you try to tell me what it was like, what you had to do, even if it was something just as simple as just going to Atlantic City.
Mhm.
Just you want to pack a lunch, or do you want to buy something while you're there? It's just certain almost commonsensical type things, rather than the more left field type things that one wouldn't expect. Uh, Generally speaking, you just want to make sure that you had the clean clothes, you had enough money, you had a way to get back if something happened.
Right.
Those are basic things that you want to make sure you plan for. Everything else is kind of fluid.
Mhm. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, I know nowadays, we have, like I said, people, I guess, still sharing information, but it's more uh with people that you don't know. I guess back then it was with people that in your community, people you knew, that possibly went to that place and you received that information from them.
And the only other internet uh, uh, collateral, yeah, the only internet like opportunity was what's on TV.
Mm.
So
Mm-hmm.
if you're going somewhere, you'd come across that place on TV, and it's okay. If I'm going there, then I need to dress warm, or I need to do this, or I need to do that. So TV was the only internet uh, parallel at that time.
Gotcha. Oh, and I wanted to go back to some of the, like, still on the security piece of the differences. Obviously, you guys had passports back then, right?
Well, you're referring to going over into Canada, is that
Or
what you're?
traveling internationally, even I guess
Uh, well,
in the 90s, yeah.
Well, I mean, going into Canada at that time, you really they didn't require one. Uh,
Mhm.
only thing that they just need to know is, that, I think just had to, if your parents, just had ID,
Mhm.
and then the Mounties or the customs folk, they just come on board, but they wouldn't be checking IDs. They just want to make sure that this is the place. But usually those things were vetted out by the bus driver and the company before you even did that. So they had the bus driver had a list of who's on board, those types of things there.
What about when you went overseas to some of the other countries?
Now, as time went on and I'm going overseas, yes, you were definitely required to have a passport during those times here.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And did Grandma Vicky ever go to like any of the islands or Caribbean, or she only went to like Canada?
No, she never traveled aside from aside from Canada. She never traveled outside of the states there.
Okay, I was just curious.
Hmm.
Okay. And so going into like culture shock, I mean, for those that don't know, in the travel realm, we eh, we define culture shock in a way that is something completely out of the norm of your usual uh, day-to-day activities that you experience when you go to another country. And obviously, other countries have different cultures, different customs that you may not be used to. And so when you travel to other countries, did you experience such culture shock?
Yeah, there was different things such as learning how to understand the difference in the currency so that you wouldn't get gypped as a baseline one there. You
Right.
could, you didn't want to just jump into a cab and go from point A to point B and hold out your money and trust the driver to just take what he wanted.
How
No,
much?
that wasn't right.
Right.
So that didn't happen. Uh,
Mhm.
uh, uh, I, I I I did enjoy a more memorable taxi ride one day when I literally was pressed for time, and I had to go from the airport in Istanbul, uh, well, to get to the airport in Istanbul to fly over to Turkmenistan, and I was a little rushed, and the taxi driver uh, either didn't speak English or pretended that he didn't speak English. But I
Mm.
just said, airport, and I didn't know the words on. I need to get there quickly, so
Mhm.
I just said the universal language, and just made that gesture with
That
and he
always
said,
works. That always
and
works, hand
he
gestures. Like,
he understood that, and I
mm.
will tell you that there was a point in time where I honestly believe when we turned the corner one certain place, we were on two wheels. That's how fast this guy was
Oh,
moving.
wow.
I really remember that part. So I was concerned with flipping over, but I'm sure he had done this before.
Wow.
um, One of the other things that was kind of interesting was, uh, and once I got to the airport, I was on what's a lot of people don't see these days, and this was the old Russian airline called Aeroflot. Aeroflot at the time had, and this is documented, it probably had the worst safety record of all the airlines in the world.
Wow.
There were so many crashes that were recorded and disasters. So I was on what was called a puddle jumper, which is one of those turboprop type planes there that probably only seated maybe about 50 people at the most. And the interesting thing about this was that because of the region, and again, this was part of the culture, the
Mhm.
pilots have due deference with everything. In other words, they board they board last. The parent the passengers board, and then the pilots come aboard the plane.
Mm.
Versus here, the pilots already aboard the plane.
Right.
When they land, and when they landed, and I was with a representative at the time who was I was traveling with, I was wondering why aren't the people getting off the plane? And he said to me, the pilots get off first. You have to
Wow.
wait for the pilots to get off, and then you can get off.
Interesting.
Like, oh, okay, all righty. So I found that that one was kind of different there because
Mm.
I can imagine in the United States, the passengers saying, "Well, I paid for this flight. Why can't I get off now?" You
Right,
can imagine.
right, exactly.
Yeah. So
Mm,
the way it was explained, it was just a matter of respect for the pilots there. That
that
was part of the culture.
that makes sense.
Uh, Another instance I remember, even while I was still in uh, Istanbul, which was a really interesting. I was there for a short time, but it was just interesting just to walk along the Bosphorus river shores there, because that's a ship town just off the Bosphorus Sea. I remember just trying to get a little sightseeing in before I left
Mhm.
there. And so I made it over to a place that's called the Blue Mosque, which was built around 1619 by the Emperor Constantinople.
Mm,
And it's literally called the Blue Mosque because of the beautiful blue tiles that are part of the ceiling throughout the inside of the mosque.
mm,
But that was the first time that I entered a place where I had to, as everyone else did, you had to take off your shoes and you left your shoes outside in these particular open cubby holes, wooden stalls,
mm.
which also I was surprised because when I got out, my shoes were still there. So there was no checks for that.
Mhm.
You didn't get a receipt for your shoes being checked. You just put them in the stall. You walked in.
Yeah.
Now, in this particular occasion, and for me, just being thankful that I could travel abroad in safety, and as you know, everything I do, I thank God for what I do because that's just me, and I don't preach anybody, but that's who got me here, and that's who I rely on.
Mhm.
So interestingly enough, in a couple of things here, I remember that I knew that while I was overseas, I knew my mom would be worried, as all mothers do, worry about until you get back. But I never had that concern at that time because
Mhm.
that was where my faith was. But I'm sure that's where her faith was as well.
Mhm.
But also, I remember that when I went in, as this was a tourist attraction, all the people that were there, they were walking around as tourists. To
Mhm.
me, I'm walking into someone's church.
Right.
So I'm not just here to look around, but I want to take the opportunity just to pray while I was there, and that's what I did.
Yeah.
So I'm sure all the tourists, which I never care about that part, looking at me while
Mhm.
I'm in one part of the place praying, they're just around, admiring the furniture, and the architecture.
Mhm.
So different cultures, respect of different cultures. uh, I learned a lot of those lessons there.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah,
and
kind of
then,
go into the piece like where you say you left your shoes outside in the cubby.
mhm,
In
mhm,
Japan, when it rains, obviously everybody has an umbrella. And if you go into some, public establishment, whether it's a restaurant or government building or whatever it is, there are stands where with little slots you can put your umbrella outside of the building, and when you come back out your umbrella is going to be there. And I feel like here, if that was the case, somebody probably would have took my umbrella and wouldn't leave no note or anything. So
yeah,
it's just something I feel like that is really specific to Japan. And yeah, I just know that they keep that, like, they keep that honor system. And then they do also have, I think they do it here and in some places in the States, when you go in and if it's raining, you have your umbrella, they have like these little bags. You can put your umbrella in the bag. And so the water's not dripping while you're walking
sure,
around, whatever. Yeah.
sure.
Mhm.
There was another interesting moment which was really prolific for me, and I believe I remember bringing that moment back and sharing that with you and your brother. Was that when I had the opportunity to go to the pyramids? There was one moment that really struck me, and while I was there at the pyramids, I noticed that there were small kids, 3, 4 years old, just big enough just to walk around, but they were toting around trash bags, picking up soda cans that were thrown into the desert by the tourists that had just finished drinking them and just tossed them out to the desert.
Wow.
And I asked about that. See, that's how they can make a little bit of money. But the question to me was, why did they actually have to do that? Why couldn't that sacred ground be respected? And
Yeah.
that was another issue that I
Yeah.
try to bring back and to show you, let you know that here's how kids over there living obviously to enhance the appreciation that I know you and your brother had about your growing up, what those opportunities that you had that so many kids that don't have. But
Yeah.
to actually see that was really, really not just enlightening, but just sadly prolific.
And I think that's something that is pretty unique to certain countries as far as respecting the historical landmarks. Because Japan, they do a great job in, uh, I guess, keeping whatever is historic, you know, pristine, clean. If you go to this temple, to this uh, jinja or museum, or whatever it is, uh, it's going to stay clean. You won't see any trash lying around. And it's so sad that people don't have that. They don't respect the grounds for what it is. This is not your home. You're coming to a place to visit, uh, to gain from this experience, and you treat it as if you're back at home just throwing trash on the ground. It's just really disrespectful. And it's really sad. And I noticed when I was in Japan, like, you didn't really see that there, like, even outsiders that did come, I mean, I don't say outsiders, but tourists that did come to visit Japan, and go to places like Kyoto, where it's rarely, like, pretty much the whole town is historic grounds. uh, Everything pretty much stayed clean. You didn't really see any trash anywhere. I mean, there's no trash cans on the streets, period, in Japan. So they tell you, you bring trash, you gotta take that home, and that's just that is what it is. It's not a known thing. That's something that people like me that have to share to other people, have never been there, or you read it on a blog or something like that. But yeah, there's really no trash cans. You probably might see a trash can or two, um, in the subway areas, like at the exits, but for the most part, they had a situation where I think someone put a bomb or something in the trash can, and so they just cleared out all the trash cans in the public areas. So yeah, but I'm just going at that to say, like, it's really sad that people don't really respect historic landmarks or grounds, especially even here. Sometimes, you'll go to, the state park or something, the national park, and people leaving trash. It's just like, come on.
Right,
We can't have
right,
nothing.
right. Yeah.
That, yeah. Did you have any other culture shocks that stuck out to you?
Uh, Not so much as I really wasn't culturally shocked at different things because I had been so used to
Mhm.
being aware of different cultures, and I spent a lot of my life learning about, even though I couldn't speak a lot of language, but I took a shot at it, and I still do to this day, trying to learn Arabic there, as you might remember there. Uh,
Mhm.
but I always had an appreciation for other cultures, and I was always interested to learn about them. So therefore, to respect them, and so whether it's over there or even over here,
Mhm.
I've always had this zest and zeal for just learning about other people's religions, cultures, just to be able to, because the more you know about them, the more you learn and can respect the other person.
Mhm.
And that to me, that's what enabled me to have a successful career in what I did, and just trying to understand and appreciate other people because there, but for the grace of God, go you.
Mhm. Yeah, because in that same manner, that's exactly how I felt when I went to Japan the first time. I wasn't shocked about anything, because I kept my mind open to any situation that I felt was different than my usual day to day life. And especially when I had to stay at different host families' houses, that's a whole nother experience. Learning about how they live. And I had pointed out this before. for them, when they take baths or showers, that's usually done at nighttime. They don't, there's no one that's taking a shower in the morning unless they go to the gym, they're going to take another shower. But for the most part, everyone takes a bath, shower at night before they go to bed, because it's about like rinsing off the dirt that you accumulated during the day. You don't want to go to sleep, dirty, which kind of makes sense. Not kind of, but it makes sense. And so, families in Japan, they usually fill up the bathtub for the whole family, and they share that same bath water. And for those, they may think it's strange, or, whatever. But for me, it made sense, because it's like you're saving water. You don't have to fill up the bathtub every single for every single person. If you have four family members, five family members living in that house, I think it makes sense to fill up the bathtub once. And that's really just for you to kind of like rinse off your body first, kind of like
Okay.
use the hot water, and that water stays hot the whole time. Trust me on that. You just kind of like clean your body first in the tub, and then you step out the tub, and then they have a space. The way that their bathrooms are set up, the toilet is not in this shower bathroom. The toilet is in a separate room. So there's plenty of space to kind of get up, use the shower head, and kind of really rinse off everything after that. But that bath water stays in the tub. So for me, when I first went to my first host family in Osaka, I was, a little taken aback by like, why is there water in the bath already? They're like, oh, you can go first. I was like, okay. So I went in there. I wasn't sure what to do, honestly. Because no one told me about this in class. I was just learning the language.
Sure, sure.
And so I did get in the bathtub, kind of like, clean up a bit. And then I'm like, okay, I need to take a shower, because that's what I'm used to do. I take showers. So I got out and I showered and I drained the water out the tub. And she was like, oh no, you don't have to take the water out. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Because I had to refill it back up for everybody else after me
Okay.
to take their bath and shower. So, but
And that's kind of similar to the Turkish bath concept, actually.
oh, what did they do?
And well, the Turkish bath. That's oftentimes when you go into these Turkish bathhouses, there it's almost like almost a steam room type of configuration,
Mm-hmm,
and folks are in the same pool of water.
mm-hmm,
I'm not so sure that they go through the measures of chlorine and all that, but it's it's
mm-hmm,
it's a shared pool of water. Uh,
mm-hmm.
so
Yeah, they have the same thing in Japan. They have bathhouses there. Well, they call them onsens, and they do the same thing. They usually have men and females in separate rooms.
sure,
But I do think they do have communal ones as well. But they do the same thing. Everybody just sits there in, in the big old bath,
yeah,
and that's just also their way of interacting with each other and kind of building that bond. I know some companies in Japan, that is like a retreat for them. They'll go to retreats in the rural areas in the mountains, and they'll have the onsen, and they all will just, that's their bonding time. That's when they get to know each other.
sure,
So it's not just about sharing a bath, but it's about building that relationship. And
sure,
that's another big thing in Japan.
sure.
Um, but yeah, so it's interesting for people that are so used to their day-to-day routines, their day-to-day cultures, that you may not know that this is your culture. But until you step outside this country and you visit someone else's country and you get to know them on a more personal level, and you start to kind of interact with the local people, you may, even though your cultures are different, the things that you do are different, your customs are different, you may find something common that you all share um, when you travel. So it's definitely great that's one of the reasons why I do uh, really promote traveling, international travel, just for that reason, for people to learn. There's only so much I feel like you can learn in a book or watching on TV. You have to actually experience it firsthand.
Sure.
So, is there any travel moment that just, just is still in your memory? Whether good or bad, that really stuck out to you that you held on to after all these years?
I can't say there's one, but it's a myriad and it's a combination. So it's all the same, and I'll describe it this way.
Mhm.
When I was working in Turkmenistan, as we were traveling along the road, and some of these roads were desert roads because we were in that southern region of Russia, which
Mhm.
Turkmenistan is, and it's very much of a desert area.
Mhm.
I noticed that even in the small towns that we went through, there were people that were outside. There was no trash outside, but they were outside just sweeping and just trying to keep their little places clean.
Mhm.
We stopped by which I asked, we stopped by a roadside kiosk in the middle of the desert to have a meal. And that was interesting because as we went in, this little shack in the middle of nowhere, but
Mhm.
I wanted to experience what they had. And so we served mutton, which is sort of like a beef stew,
Okay.
and washed it down with pepper vodka. And you could taste the pepper.
Wow.
Yeah, so we had the beef stew, and there was a salad, which unfortunately I didn't think about at the time because I was drinking bottled water. But the salad was washed in the water, which is probably not bottled water. Which
Right.
at the end of the day, I came back with one nice little rash around my neck that stuck with me for about a week and a half there until I went to a dermatologist and got it cleared up there.
Oh,
No, which
wow.
which I found that rather interesting. And then even in the hotel, and I'm sure you experienced this as well, the shower had no curtains, and the water just flowed onto the floor.
Mhm.
And I was wondering, okay, am I getting in trouble for this? No, but that's just that's that was just how it was set up there. Uh, yeah. So it was those little moments then, but what really for me was most prolific out of that was my experience in working with uh, the people that were there and having that moment to have a moment of shared culture and appreciation for each other as humans. Uh,
Mhm.
and I had taken, as I do all the time, I taken little souvenirs here and there and given it to a couple of people there. But the guy I happened to be working with, who was from over there, he appreciated so much that he had given me a historical book of Turkmenistan, which he signed, and I still have it to that day, and I hold that in high regard. It just showed that no matter what, people can appreciate and help each other, and so our relationship went past work. It was a shared personal relationship because, interesting enough, in the southern region, which was and may still be to a great extent an Islamic region of Russia and Turkmenistan. So he was a Muslim, uh,
Mm.
and so that was even more bonding for me, knowing and having appreciation uh, of the Islamic religion, as I do of all religions, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But that was just that moment in time that I'll never forget.
Mhm. Yeah, I remember you told me that story about you going to the shack in the desert and eating the salad, and that stuck with me. So, like, when I went to Taiwan, I was really, weary, and even when I went to South Korea, because they have outdoor markets too. Um, but I'm just like, if I don't know what that is, that you're supposed to be adventurous and, try new things, they say, but I'm just like, I don't know about that one.
Well, it just becomes a matter of balancing adventurism with trepidation.
Right,
You
right.
know?
I just say do what you're comfortable in doing, because if you don't feel comfortable, I mean, yeah, you say, oh yeah, I ate that, but then later on you got to deal with the consequences. I'm just like, I don't know if I want to deal with the consequences later
that's,
on.
that's right. That's right there.
Yeah, I was when you were talking about your moments. One of the moments that really stuck out to me was when I was living in Japan and I was in Osaka, and it was just a weekend. I just wanted to go out to the city area. Um, and just kind of like just walk around. I kind of went outside of the city of Umeda in Osaka, and I went to like one of the local towns that was like right next to the city. And that's where I saw that there were a bunch of mom and pop shops and tiny cafes. And I was just like, wow, this is a cute little quaint town. I didn't even know that this was here. And I just happened to walk by this uh, house, and a cat was just sitting in the window. And I was just like, cat. I'm like, it's so random. And it's funny because this old Japanese guy was looking at the cat too. And so we were just standing there looking at the cat. And he looked at me and he was just like, pointing to the cat, like, yeah. I was like, I know this. And then I told him it's interesting in Japanese. And he looked at me like, you just spoke to me in Japanese.
Surprise, surprise.
And he was like, wow, your Japanese is good. He's saying this in Japanese. And I told him, thank you. And he was like, how long have you been here? And I was like, it was like 2 years, I think, at that point. And he was like, wow, it's really good. And he was like, what do you do? And I told him I was this English teacher here. He was like, oh, wow. He was like, yeah. And he had his camera. So he was out taking pictures just like I was like out, doing a vlog as well of the town. So it was just a nice like bonding moment over a cat in the window.
Yeah. Did you take a picture of the cat?
I think it's in my vlog. So if you check
Okay.
out my vlog
Alrighty.
on YouTube, it's
Okay.
Osaka, and I'll put it in the show notes. You can
Okay.
see the cat in the window.
All
And you
right
can hear
then.
me talking to the guy too. You can hear our conversation. And I have
Okay.
subtitles there. So
Great.
yeah. I think those little moments are just like, just reminds me of why I moved there and why I travel. You never know what small things that you can pick up on, but it'll build on later on. So,
That's right.
but
That's right.
yeah. So for that traveler that used to travel back in the day, but they're unsure about, even traveling during this weird time of COVID, or they used to travel back then, but haven't really gotten back out there in that travel realm in the international landscape. What do you have any advice for them, or even someone that grew up in Philly with you and they've never left that block or they never left the city? Is what would you just tell them to just kind of get them out their seat and just get them interested in traveling or want to buy that first plane ticket?
I think, and there is actually, tragically speaking, there are some that I grew up with that are still in the same neighborhood.
Yeah,
And nothing against them, but just that they may not know how much they have missed out on.
yeah,
Challenging, both challenging times back then and even now.
yeah.
I think that the more they engage with people who have traveled and engage in those types of questions as we have here, and even in this dialogue arena,
Mhm,
that could assuage many anxieties about those things. Some people have never even flown before.
mhm,
I would just say that you only go through this way one time, and if you don't try to at least go beyond your comfort level, then you will never expand your comfort level,
mhm,
and you will never expand yourself as a person beyond the scope and barriers of that geographical area that you confine yourself to.
mhm.
So if you're going to live life, and just go for it. Do what you can to be precautious, and then take those precautions when you can. Uh, but one can never anticipate anything, because as we know in these days and times, things can happen to you when you walk out your front door.
Mhm. Mhm.
So you have to trust in the spirit of that which guides you, and that trust in something that allows you to say, well, I want to do this, and I'm going to go for it. And you'll be surprised. Just do it one time,
Mhm.
and you'll be hooked on and take pride in your own initiative and independence, and will probably yearn for more.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly what happened to us. I know.
Yes, and it was important for me at that time to make sure that you and Nanwar had and saw and had those opportunities. It was important, for your mother and I to instill that in both of you, so that uh, you would never be limited by anything, and because of what you can do, you can share that with your peers, and just the positive spiraling effect and spiderweb effect of that would resonate positively with others.
Mhm.
Hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I totally agree on that. Well, I appreciate you joining me today. I really wanted to get you on my podcast for a while. I just was trying to figure out, you could talk about pretty much many different topics. So I felt like this was a good way to kind of bring you in and talk about, you know, like I said, pre 9/11 and how you experienced travel back then compared to now.
Yes,
So I hope, that our listeners definitely learn something and are inspired by, your stories and hopefully, you guys buy a plane ticket in the near future.
that's right. That's right. And if I may add one small thing there,
Of course.
not just my story, but the story of so many others. I was recently blessed enough to be part uh, of an inaugural and new book that was put out by Drexel University,
Mhm.
of 50 Black students over the past years,
Mhm.
that went on to do different things. And every single one of those stories is an inspiring story on perseverance and those other things that I went through. It mentions my riding my bike, throughout South Philly to get to West Philly to go to high school when there was a bus strike in Philadelphia years ago when I was in high school, just to get to school.
Oh wow.
So, imagine all the gang territories that I ran through or rode through rather, just to get to high school, but I didn't want to miss school. But that book to me is such a blessing because it shares not just my story, but so many other stories of people like me and that look like us that didn't get certain opportunities, but whatever opportunity we had, we welcomed it, we embraced it, and we were able to flourish from it.
Hmm.
So just wanted to mention that as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm definitely going to add a link for those that are interested in getting the book. I'll put that in the show notes so that they can have the opportunity to
I
buy the
appreciate
book.
that.
And I really think that people, and it's not just for Black people, for anyone,
Exactly.
read those stories and getting inspired and whatever you want to do, that you're hoping to do or have been meaning to do, that it's on your list of goals. Like now is the time, and there's never, you know, it's never too late to do anything. I know it's like very cliche statement, but I really believe that. So yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me on the show. I feel so special.
All right. But thank you for listening. This is obviously going to be part two. I'm going to break this up into two sections.
Okay.
But I appreciate you all for listening, and all the information that we have mentioned today will be in the show notes. Be sure to check out the website, AA Wine and Hike, soon to be Act 3, Angie's Adventures. Hopefully by this time this episode comes out, it will be Act 3, Angie's Adventures. But yeah, make sure you check out the blog. Everything, you can listen to the episode on the blog, on the website. You can see all the information on there and some pictures. And you can view this video as well. The full video will be up on YouTube and on the website. So thanks again for listening and see you guys next time. Thanks, Daddy.
Arigato.